Хто з цих великих країн, всіх ядерних держав, хто з цих країн постраждав? Всі? Ні, одна, Україна. Хто віддав ядерну зброю? Всі? Ні, одна. Хто? Україна. Хто сьогодні воює? Україна. І тому виходить у нас так. І в розмові з Дональдом Трампом я йому сказав, у нас виходить так. Який же вихід? Або у України буде ядерна зброя, і тоді це для нас захист. Або ми повинні мати якийсь альянс. Окрім НАТО, на сьогодні ми не знаємо дієві альянси. Країни НАТО сьогодні не в війні. Країни НАТО не воюють. Країні НАТО люди всі живі, слава Богу. І тому ми і обираємо. Ми і обираємо НАТО. Не ядерну зброю. Ми обираємо НАТО.
The war in 2024 did not unfold in Ukraine's favor. This was the starting line of RBC Ukraine's latest frontline analysis. Delays in aid, they say, from its main ally, the United States, combined with problems within the military itself, prevented Ukraine's resistance against Russia's pressure. Moscow, it says, has been conducting an offensive operation for over a year and has made notable progress. Statements from Western leaders and representatives of the Ukrainian government indirectly or explicitly suggest that the war might be closer to a climax than ever. Perhaps, they say, it has already begun. However, this so-called culmination does not resemble what many would have expected in 2022 and in 2023. Russia is currently focusing its efforts on capturing the southern part of the Donetsk region, particularly an area where they achieved their most significant breakthrough in 18 months following the capture of Avdiivka. The most intense fighting areas on the front are near Velika Novosilka and the Kurakhove settlements. Velika Novosilka, once a key point for Ukraine's counteroffensive in 2023, is now semi-surrounded. North of Velika Novosilka, Russian forces have cut off two key roads leading from the city. To the south, they regained control of some settlements along the Mori-Yali River, which Ukrainian forces had liberated in 2023. Ukrainian troops defending the area, particularly around the village of Makarivka, face the threat of encirclement. Kurakhove is a critical defense hub for Ukraine in southern Donetsk and is almost entirely under the Russians' control, except for the Kurakhove power plant. This past Thursday, the Novaya Gazeta, an EU publication, reported that Russian servicemen raised the Russian flag on the council building in Kurakhove. According to even pro-Ukrainian sources like Ukrainian OSINT project Deep State, Russia has occupied over half of Kurakhove, while the armed forces of Ukraine remain in control of the industrial zone at the Kurakhove power plant and the pipe factory in the west of the town. While the capture of the town has not been confirmed by official sources, Russian pro-war bloggers are already celebrating victory. In quotations, the enemy admits it has completely lost one high-rise district in Kurakhove, said pro-war telegram channel DVA Mayora, adding that most of the town was under the control of the Russian military as of this past Monday morning. BBC News Russian reported that Russian units were tightening the noose around the whole area, having taken villages near Kurakhove and cut off one of the roads connecting the nearby village of Velika Novosilka to the Ukrainian rear. Should Kurakhove be captured by the Russians, it will make the situation on the front line in Donbas even more difficult, as most AFU logistics went through the town, Russian military expert Alexei Kuznetsov told Novaya Gazeta Europe. It looks like the Ukrainians will still cling to the industrial zone near the Kurakhove reservoir, but it is clear that the days of Kurakhove's defense are numbered, Mr. Kuznetsov said. South of Kurakhove, in the so-called Kurakhove pocket, the situation is equally dire. Unfortunately, Kurakhove's capture will be complete within a matter of weeks, according to military researcher Kirill Mykolaiv, who said this in an interview, adding that after the town is captured fully, the Russian forces engaged there could move to Kurakhove, another key town in the Donetsk region, and eventually move on to central Ukraine's Dnipro region. Other critical areas are Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. Battles have been ongoing in these sectors for months. Capturing these cities is part of Russia's plan to occupy the northern Donetsk region. If successful, their forces would advance toward Konstantinivka and later the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. However, this operation remains in its early stages. So today's video will be a sort of end-of-year Christmas special. I intend to give a general synopsis of the front line for 2024, which most Ukrainian media admits did not go in Ukraine's favor. In the synopsis, I will also talk about a potential offensive in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, news which is buzzing across Ukrainian media as of today. I will also then cover the Lyman front, which has not been very active, but which is crucial to the final battle, which will contain the 4 last defensive cities of Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk. Lastly, I'll end by exploring what several Ukrainian analysts predict to be the future of this war in 2025, particularly with President Donald Trump's inauguration due on the 20th of January. And as usual, I appreciate all super thanks donations as well as any purchases from the merch store. And don't forget to consider joining the channel membership, where I try to release exclusive content several times during the week. And let's get into it. To occupy this agglomeration, that is the Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Konstantinivka defensive belt, the Russians need to resolve at least a few complex tasks to the north. The first task is to capture the entire left bank of the Oskil River in the Kupiansk direction, from which they can advance southward along the river with a covered flank. The Russians reached the banks of the Oskil River about a month ago, but has not been able to expand this breakthrough due to constant counterattacks by the Ukrainian forces. The Russians' second unresolved task is capturing a bridgehead near the Lyman area, from which they aim to advance on Sloviansk in 2022. They lost control over this area in the fall of that year during the Ukrainian counteroffensive. The third obstacle for the Russians is the Siversk salient, which can still be considered the most stable section of the front from the Ukrainian point of view, although Russian attacks have recently intensified there. Thus, battles for Sloviansk and Kramatorsk agglomeration do not yet appear to be an immediate prospect. Another critical bridgehead where intense fighting is ongoing is in the Kursk region. Russian forces are attacking this bridgehead from multiple directions: northwest, northeast, and southeast. Russian soldiers have managed to reach Malaya Loknia and reach into Plehovo. And 2 additional sectors in southern Ukraine remain concerning for Ukrainian analysts, and I have not spoken about them at all on this channel. Several informed Ukrainian sources confirm that Moscow has not abandoned plans to launch an offensive in Zaporizhia and advance toward Kherson. According to them, the Russians' readiness for an offensive on the right bank of Kherson is higher than in Zaporizhia. Ukrainian forces anticipate that the primary strike may target the area around Pyatikati village along the Dnipro River, which is under the responsibility of the enemy's Dnipro operational group. However, actions near the Huliapol settlement are not ruled out. As for Kherson, which also falls under the Dnipro group, the Russians have already attempted to launch operations on the right bank of the Dnipro.
Натяните кто-нибудь веревку по-братски. Да, я тебе. А вот это... что за...
The latest attempt occurred last week when Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups tried to breach the Antonivsky Bridge from the direction of Oleshki. These attempts were repelled. Sources indicate that the decision to launch offensive actions in the Kherson region has already been made. This operation will be overseen by the commander of the Russian airborne forces, Mikhail Teplinsky. According to RBC Ukraine, approximately 4,000 assault troops may be involved in the offensive actions. These include in particular the 61st Separate Marine Brigade of the Russian Federation and airborne units such as the 7th Airborne Assault Division. Symbolically, it was the paratroopers who retreated from the Kherson region in the fall of 2022. There may be two directions of attack, one to the north near Nova Kakhovka and the other to the south of Kherson. Ukrainian analysts speculate that the start of active operations directly depends on weather conditions and the success of Russian actions in the Kursk region. To move toward Kherson, the Russians will inevitably need to cross the Dnipro River. However, there are no intact bridges in the area, meaning they would need to use boats or establish crossings. On certain sections of the Dnipro, following the destruction of the Kharkovka hydroelectric power plant, a swampy terrain has formed. During cold weather, this terrain freezes, which facilitates passage, something the Russians are also aware of. Additionally, part of the airborne troops from the Dnipro group have been redeployed to support Russian units in the Kursk region and have not yet returned. However, some sources doubt the success of Moscow's plans, given the complexity of such an operation and the fact that the Russians on the right bank are already being awaited. Now let's move on to talk a little bit about the Lyman front, which is previously a fairly inactive front, but given that the last defensive belt from Druzhivka and Konstantinivka all the way to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk lies in this area, it is likely that in 2025 this front may re-emerge as a hotspot. The Russian troops are conducting assault operations, although not as active as near Pokrovsk and around Kurakhove. However, this does not mean that this area is less difficult to hold. Rostislav Yasheshin, senior lieutenant spokesman for the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, spoke about the Russian goals and the Ukrainian armed forces' counteraction in the Lyman direction. According to him, there are no major changes. The Russian forces are trying to attack mainly with infantry. He claims it is because the Ukrainian defenders have been able to destroy a lot of Russian equipment. Of course, this information is impossible to verify. The Ukrainian brigade has been stationed in this area for an extended period, and he says they are well acquainted with all the routes, approaches, access points, and flight paths. According to the lieutenant, Ukrainian forces control not only the land, but also the air. Pilots, he says, have learned to shoot down Russian reconnaissance drones, and this activity has become very effective. According to the lieutenant, the Russians facing the Ukrainian armed forces on this front is the 25th Russian Army. Its personnel consists of different categories. The first category includes socially disadvantaged Russians. He considers them to be expendable and can be sent to the front. The second category is the convicts, or those who were supposed to become prisoners but chose war over prison. The third category consists of the lower income segments of society who opt for war due to lack of other income sources. The fourth category is ideologically driven soldiers who want to impose the, in quotations, Russian peace on us, as he described it. Now, out of the 5 cities currently under assault from the Russian armed forces in the Donbas, i.e. Velika Novosilka, Kurakhove, Pokrovsk, Chasiv, and Toretsk, Kurakhove is likely the first to fall.
Давай. Сейчас. Давай. Да откройте, сука, дверь ёбаную. Давайте, давай. Куда?
In the city itself, according to Russian military expert Mr. Kuznetsov, Russian troops are now just 3 kilometers from the highway connecting Kurakhove and the southeastern Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. And if they manage to cut the road off, the remaining Ukrainian units in Kurakhove would have to either break through or surrender, as he put it. Reserve AFU colonel and military expert Roman Svitman agreed that holding on to the Kurakhove-Zaporizhia highway was crucial for the Ukrainian units deployed in the area. The Ukrainians can stay in the industrial zone of the Kurakhove power plant while they still can be supplied with ammunition, food, and everything they need, he explained. The situation around the area remains difficult, however. There have been reports that Ukrainian troops have withdrawn from the risky area of the northern Kurakhove Sak, Aspenivka, and Konstantinopolsky. A group of deep state analysts reported that not everyone managed to leave, and the operational encirclement of some of the Ukrainian units continues. But Ukrainian analysts are even more concerned about the serious manpower shortage within the Ukrainian army that has plagued it for much of 2024. As one reported this last week, In quotations, the Ukrainian armed forces faces difficult decisions over acute shortage of frontline troops. The depleted army is increasingly made up of older men, but President Zelensky is reluctant to lower the mobilization age from 25. A series of interviews with Ukrainian officers who spoke anonymously, given the sensitivity of the issue, paint a worrying picture for Ukraine's war effort. In fact, the UK Guardian newspaper released a report this week where they interviewed several Ukrainian servicemen on the front, and their story tells a very dire situation for the Ukrainian army. Two sources in air defense units told The Guardian the deficit at the front has become so acute that the General Staff has ordered already depleted air defense units to free up more men to send to the front as infantry. It's reaching a critical level where we can't be sure that air defense can function properly, said one of the sources, saying he had been prompted to speak out by a fear that the situation was a risk to Ukraine's security. These people knew how air defense works. Some had been trained in the West and had real skills. Now they are sent to the front to fight, for which they have no training, said the source. Commanders can use the orders to send soldiers they do not like to the front as punishment, said the source. There is also a fear that equipped with sensitive knowledge about Ukrainian air defense positions and tactics, there is a risk of these soldiers giving up important information if they are captured by Russians at the front. Last month, Mariana Bezula, an outspoken and controversial MP, claimed in a post on Telegram that air defense troops were being transferred to infantry units, leading to worse success rates for Ukraine shooting down Russian drones. Yuri Inat, a spokesperson for the Air Defense Forces, confirmed at the time that the transfers were taking place, saying they were, in quotations, very painful. But he denied that it was affecting shooting down rates. Those The Guardian spoke with said the increasing demands for transfers were making it hard to run the air defense units properly, however. This has been going on for a year, but it's been getting worse and worse, said another source, an officer working on air defense. I'm already down to less than half of full strength. In recent days, the commission came and they want dozens more. I'm left with those aged 50 plus and injured people. It is impossible to run things like this, he lamented. The people who we get now are not like the people who were there in the beginning of the war, said one soldier currently serving in Ukraine's 114th Territorial Defense Brigade, who has been stationed in various hotspots over the past 2 years. Recently, we received 90 people, but only 24 of them were ready to move to the positions. The rest were old, sick, or alcoholics. A month ago, they were walking around Kiev or Dnipro, and now they are in a trench and can barely hold a weapon. Poorly trained and poorly equipped, he said. So given this context of 2024, let's go on to talk about what the Ukrainian analysts predict as the possible scenarios for 2025.
Зліва де?
The current plan of Russia is to advance wherever possible. Ukraine, for both objective and subjective reasons, cannot halt the Russians' momentum or seize the initiative on the front lines. For now, they admit all trends indicate that it is unlikely to turn the situation in Ukraine's favor anytime soon. Most, if not all, Western leaders appear to doubt the possibility of reclaiming all of Ukraine's territories by force, and they are increasingly calling for peace negotiations with Russia. This idea is clearly articulated by Donald Trump and his team. The further fate of the war now largely lies in the hands of the United States. While no clear strategy for ending hostilities has yet come from the US, it is certain that immediately after the inauguration, the new White House team will actively engage in a peace process. The first scenario is that Trump fails to pressure Moscow into negotiations, leading to a gradual loss of interest in the peace process, shifting focus to domestic American issues. Aid to Ukraine either stagnates or diminishes. Ukraine continues to lose territory, and the grueling war could end next year. Second scenario, the US succeeds in bringing all parties to the negotiation table. However, Putin only pretends to be ready to end the war, while using the negotiation process to prolong the conflict and secure further territorial gains. During this time, attention to the war wanes, as does aid to Ukraine. Hostilities continue, and Ukraine continues to lose territory. These two scenarios are supported by the fact that President Putin currently has some successes on the front. His army is making consistent progress, According to RBC Ukraine, Russia managed to recruit 430,000 volunteers this year, with a plan for 450,000 in 2025. And they asked the question, why would he stop if he could occupy even more territory? If Trump fails to bring Putin to the negotiating table, however, events may unfold according to a third scenario. Trump cannot compel the Kremlin to negotiate. Instead, the US sharply increases aid and arms supplies to Ukraine. As a result, by mid-year, Ukraine may be able to transition from defense to a new offensive campaign and thereby improve its negotiating position. Then negotiations are back on the agenda. In this scenario, the Ukrainian analysts expect hostilities to end by the end of 2025 or extend into 2026. This is of course assuming Ukraine even has sufficient manpower to conduct such an offensive, which in my opinion is almost out of the question given the Guardian report above. Until then, Putin seeks to achieve as many gains on the front as possible to have more leverage in these upcoming peace talks.
Уходим!